So return to the epic adventure of the original Star Wars trilogy to take an in-depth look at its concluding chapter, Return of the Jedi. Seeking to end the Rebel Alliance once and for all, the resourceful Galactic Empire has secretly been building a larger, more powerful Death Star above the forest moon of Endor. Lord Darth Vader comes aboard to motivate construction on forward, as the Emperor is soon to arrive. Meanwhile, the friends of Han Solo strategically infiltrate the palace of notorious gangster Jabba the Hutt, with the intention of freeing him from his carbonite prison, and ultimately rescuing him. Upon saving Han and dispatching with Jabba and his henchmen, Luke Skywalker returns to Dagobah, where he gains confirmation on his parentage, and learns the existence of another Skywalker from Obi-Wan Kenobi. Soon thereafter, the Rebel Alliance convenes to launch their plans to destroy the shield generator on the Endor moon, and for the fleet to engage and destroy the new Death Star, along with the Emperor in the process. However, Luke Skywalker soon decides that he must leave his friends behind to confront his father Darth Vader, but when his attempts to draw him away from the dark side fail, he is taken before the Emperor and discovers far more terrifying realities that threaten to annihilate the rebellion and to turn the Jedi Knight to an agent of the dark side. So produced on a budget of $32.5 million, Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi was released to theaters exactly 6 years to the date of the release of the original Star Wars on May 25th, 1983, and George Lucas again fully funded the film and executive produced it, as well as co-screenwriting it with Lawrence Kasdan, and there was some issues in trying to get the full screenplay for the film done because they didn't get a final draft produced for it until very late into pre-production on the film, after a lot of the art direction, all the budget had been put together based on the story outlines and all the other stuff that George Lucas had prepared up to that point. So it caused a little bit of trouble trying to go in production and try to get everything put together and finalized and actually conceptualized with the final draft of the screenplay before you went to production. And again, George Lucas decided, I'm not going to direct this entry in the whole franchise, so he sought out a couple different directors going into the project, including originally he kind of eyed his friend Steven Spielberg, but because Lucas had so many problems with the Directors Guild of America with the prior two films and actually resigned from the guild, he really couldn't use a guild director for the film, so he looked at David Lynch and he looked at David Cronenberg, and ultimately both guys decided to go off and do different projects, with Cronenberg doing Videodrome and The Dead Zone, and David Lynch going on to Dune with Dino De Laurentiis, and the fact that we ended up getting the director of the film Eye of the Needle, Richard Marquand, on this film, who didn't have a whole lot of experience with doing a lot of visual effects heavy type of stuff, so George Lucas really did have to be very present on set and on location to sort of supervise and try to ease those types of things, along with all the guys at ILM supervising the effects sequences for the film, and try to bridge that gap between Marquand and the effects people on the film to really kind of move things forward overall. And definitely one of the other shakeups in the staff on Return of the Jedi was in the role of producer of the film, because producer Gary Kurtz had done the first two films alongside his friend George Lucas, but Kurtz and Lucas ended up having a bit of a disagreement on the direction of the franchise in terms of story versus spectacle, that Kurtz was very much adamant about the fans really being invested in the story, and supposedly Lucas being much more fixated on people enjoying the spectacle more than the story, so very much a disagreement there, and they decided to part ways. So you got producer Howard Kazajian onto the film, and between Lucas and Kasdan and Marquand and Kazajian, they all started to work a little bit on the script when you're trying to get to the point where you had that shooting script ready for the start of production. So there's a lot of different committees, a lot of different collaborations, throwing ideas around, and a lot of different things, that even in the fact that originally Yoda was not supposed to appear in Return of the Jedi, but Marquand was very much insistent that the character show up in the film to kind of tie off some loose ends, including have someone in the whole context of the film that you absolutely trust to confirm the whole thing about Darth Vader being Luke's father. And even supposedly George Lucas had consulted a sort of child psychologist to really kind of understand that little kids or people like that might be in total disbelief about Darth Vader's claim, because obviously he's the villain of the film. You're not entirely certain you can take him at 100% of his word. You need a certain confirmation, corroboration about this fact to really kind of get it to sink into people and solidify that. And having the character of Yoda there to tie off his part of the whole trilogy and confirm that whole thing in the whole film was very much on the insistence of Richard Marquand here. And Return of the Jedi is definitely an interesting examination for me, because it really is the one film in the original trilogy where my opinion has kind of declined about it over time, that despite having some very great things to its credit, I do think that Return of the Jedi does have a few flaws to it and a couple of missed opportunities to make the film and story as strong and substantive as possible in all aspects. And certainly one of the things that really kind of shows its head here is that the first two Star Wars films do have very strong openings. Obviously, with the first film, action sequence right from the start of the film, and the second film, Empire Strikes Back, really has a great sense of danger and threatening presence to it with how things unfold at the beginning of that film. But Return of the Jedi has a much slower opening to it, that things are just kind of progressing on a much more subdued, slow type of gradual level here, that you got Darth Vader showing up on the Death Star, just having a conversation, then you have the slow build-up of stuff at Jabba's palace here, that there isn't an action sequence in the film until 25 minutes in, when Luke Skywalker gets dropped in the Rancor pit, and obviously things progress from that point onward. But it is kind of an interesting build that you see all the characters that we're familiar with and all these different elements kind of introducing themselves and converging inside Jabba's palace, kind of building one thing on top of another. So there is a very good sense of mystery here about how things are unraveling, how the plot is laid out here, that obviously Luke Skywalker himself has put together. So you see all these little things kind of gradually build up, and you think that our heroes are suffering a couple of failures here, that Leia gets captured and Han gets put in the cell and Chewbacca's brought in and everything. So you think that our heroes are in a lot of danger, but it's obviously Luke Skywalker plotting this whole thing out to build up all his friends in one location so they can strike back and escape with all their friends intact. So it is an interesting thing that has a very good payoff when they're on the sail barge above the pit of Carcoon. That is a fantastic action sequence, but there is a certain thing about this film that it does feel fairly compartmentalized in a certain way, that one of the things that has worked fabulously with the first two Star Wars films, pretty much all the Star Wars films as well, is that they have a lot of intercutting storylines, that they have a lot of things cutting from one storyline to another one. So you keep having this great energy and momentum building up and feeling that different storylines of plots and characters are all converging and building up towards something. So you're cutting from one storyline to the next, back and forth, to have everything build up in the type of way. Return of the Jedi is a lot more compartmentalized, because the entire sequence with Jabba the Hutt is played out as one complete isolated type of adventure that's completely separate from everything else that goes on in the film, and we don't intercut with any other storyline that is going to play into the rest of the film. So it's like one isolated, complete adventure that has its own certain pace to it, and then we depart from that and move on to other things in the film. So it feels like the film could have used a little bit of that intercutting type of energy right from the beginning, that the structure of the film could have used a lot more of that interweaving type of storylines and plot threads to really kind of keep things moving along, because even the entire issue of Darth Vader being Luke Skywalker's father and Luke going to see Yoda and get all these things explained, which is a lot of the main things that a lot of people are really kind of hanging on the edge of their seat to have followed up on and have it develop and have it pay off in this film, doesn't even get addressed until 40 minutes into the movie. And it just feels like the whole film really could have used a lot more threads to really kind of start it off much stronger, because there was that deleted scene where Darth Vader communicates with Luke Skywalker through the Force, and you see Luke putting together his lightsaber, just have those slight thread kind of connect with the film, to have these two characters connect on that sort of level there, to have that thread be introduced right at the beginning of the film, keep that seed in everyone's minds, and have it thread through and pick up at a later point. Instead, it's all this one adventure, then we move on to something else, then we move on to yet another thing. So it's like the film just kind of compartmentalizes a lot of its story elements instead of interweaving things to have the most momentum of the story. But there is a certain thing to say that the somber tone that the film kind of has at many different points really kind of works for the concluding chapter of a trilogy, that there is a lot of time taken very generously to have the characters develop. Take all these moments in the film to just have the characters settle down and discuss and develop things and just move their own characters and their own storylines forward, because it is very pivotal when you get with Luke and Yoda or Luke and Obi-Wan talking about these very, very important things that you don't want to rush through. You want to have them take the proper time to get through these elements, which are very important parts of the emotional impact of the film, to really have these moments develop at their own gradual pace to have the most impact on the story as possible. But I do feel there are a number of lulls in the film where the opportunity could have been taken to really kind of develop and flesh out different little aspects of certain characters and conflicts that they end up having throughout the whole film, because the main focus of the film is that conflict between Luke, Vader, and the Emperor. And just the fact of the matter is that Mark Hamill again puts in a really strong performance here, having Luke Skywalker come into his full maturity here, because you can see it right from the outset, from the first moments that you see him on screen. He has developed, he has grown yet again from the events of the previous film to really kind of have a much more stronger air of confidence, a certain aura of mystique around him too, that really is a certain different type of air about him, that he has a much more peaceful sensibility about himself inside, that he is kind of exuding a sense of hope and optimism, that he is someone who's not so much about just defeating the dark side, that he does have a much more perceptive nature about himself now. And just the fact of the matter is that Luke Skywalker in this film just comes to such a great fruition as a very noble and honorable Jedi Knight, that you just feel everything from this thing. From Mark Hamill's performance, you just feel every sensibility. Even again, when you go have that scene where he's opposite Yoda again, completely different feel from what you had between him and Yoda in the previous film. They almost feel like equals. There is such a mutual respect now between the two characters that you didn't really have so much in the previous film, because Luke was such a troubled character, but now he's gone through all this trauma, he's gone through all this drama too, to really kind of have him develop into that perfect type of hero that we really, really want him to become. And it's absolutely fantastic what Mark Hamill again achieves in this film, that again, he doesn't have as much stretching of his emotions to really kind of go through so much of a traumatic state as he did in Empire, but the fact of the matter is, in Return of the Jedi, he becomes that figurehead, that icon of nobility and everything, to really kind of have this character develop in such a fantastic, interesting type of way. Just seeing everything that has gone down with this character throughout all three films, that it's even interesting that there is a sort of symbolism with the character here, that you notice even in his costumes. In the first film, completely white outfit. In Empire, he's dressed in all gray. In this film, Return of the Jedi, he's in all black. So it shows a certain interesting maturity, a certain progression visually with the character, that he's kind of gone from the pure innocence to sort of the gray troubled area. Now he's in this sort of confident black type of outfit that really kind of also mirrors a little bit of Darth Vader too. So there is a certain symbolism going on with this film and throughout the entire arc with the character of Luke Skywalker here, that I think Mark Hamill did another solid job to really just bring this character all the way to the end of his arc here. But we obviously know with The Force Awakens and this new sequel trilogy, there's likely a lot more to his story left to be told. But with this original trilogy, Mark Hamill just put forth fantastic arc overall that just absolutely fascinating to watch. I think is such the great linchpin of the entire trilogy, to see how this character developed through all three films and everything else. When you see what he started out as and you see where he ended up as, is a fantastic stark contrast of a character that's absolutely fabulous to watch. And in this installment of the trilogy, it really was a question about whether or not Harrison Ford would return, because he was not contracted for as many films as his co-stars were, and Harrison Ford really kind of felt that Han Solo's story arc had pretty much ended, that he'd gone through as much as he can and there really wasn't much more to explore. So he felt Han Solo should have died and had sort of a sacrifice in the film to add some sort of extra peril to the whole thing. And screenwriter Lawrence Kasdan really was in agreement with that, but George Lucas vetoed that idea, and you can definitely see that Han Solo really doesn't have a whole lot to really do in the film. It's a lot of
just being there for a lot of the action sequences, and he doesn't really have any kind of story arc to explore or any kind of development that he really had in the previous two films to really kind of go on a story arc for himself. But the fact of the matter is that Harrison Ford still puts in a very solid performance, just bringing us the fun, charming Han Solo that we absolutely love, and still having a few moments here and there with Carrie Fisher to really kind of, again, drive home that bond the two characters have. I absolutely love it when Leia breaks him out of the carbonite and just have that moment there between them, and just like Han just is so relieved that the one person that come to save him and is there when he gets burned out of this carbonite and everything is the woman that he absolutely loves, and just the woman that he feared for at the moment that he was frozen. So it's like a fantastic little moment there, and a little kind of bookmarked at the end of the film too. But again, there's not terribly much for the character of Han Solo to really explore in this film, to really kind of push him towards any place or whatnot. And we definitely get some good stuff from Carrie Fisher in this film, that it really is that, again, she doesn't have too much to do, but during the one scene in the film where she has that face-to-face sit-down with Mark Hamill as Luke Skywalker, that she finds out that Luke's her brother and her parentage and everything, Carrie Fisher does a very good, heartfelt, sort of touching performance in that scene, that you definitely get a certain sense of the tender depth of the character there, that it really is a very strong type of performance. In one scene, does a lot for her character to really kind of develop her and really kind of give her something meaty to really kind of dig into in the film. And unfortunately, it really doesn't get any further explored throughout the rest of the film. That is a great scene that sets up something good that the character of Leia could have explored internally in the film if it really wanted to go that way, that she finds out that Luke Skywalker is her brother, and by de facto, Darth Vader is her father too. So it's like this sort of element of the entire revelation that's kind of glossed over, and you don't really get explored anywhere. Just like she has that moment there at the end of the scene where she sort of embraces Han because she's feeling very conflicted and very emotional about the whole thing, but after that, nothing is really kind of carried on beyond that, aside from a little moment here at the end of the film to really kind of explain it to Han. So it's like a great little thing that they could have really dug into and really developed, and really kind of had the character of Leia have something much more tangible, much more substantive to really grapple with in the film. Because like I said, the real substance of the film is circled around Luke, Vader, and the Emperor here, that no one else really has anything really to dig themselves into to really kind of make the film as strong and substantive and as thriving and pulsating with that type of depth overall. But the fact of the matter is, there are certain moments throughout the whole film, even with like Han and Lando, probably somewhere off screen they reconciled, or Chewbacca in the prison on Jabba's palace kind of explained the whole situation and kind of helped smooth things over between the two characters. But it would have been kind of nice to have a little something between them to really kind of acknowledge how they kind of left each other at the end of the previous film and really kind of develop something more. But they get a fantastic little interactions in the film, and just, it's kind of fun. But you know, again, with a film that just has one main thing that is really focusing on in depth, it would have been nice to just have a few little things sprinkled in here and there to really kind of give the film something more of a thread through to build it up and keep everyone as meaty as possible in this film, to really kind of give everyone as much of a big payoff beyond just the implications of Empire versus Rebellion and the dark side versus the light side. We'll have had some nice little internal emotional conflicts for some of the characters to deal with, but the fact of the matter is, that's not a knock against any of the acting in the film, because it's absolutely solid. All the people returning to the film embody their characters are just the exact same excellent level they always have before. And we also get some very interesting stuff with Darth Vader here, that after we had everything that went down in the previous film, you definitely see a bit of a different Vader, that he is a bit more subdued, that you kind of feel that conflict within him. That is very interesting, that you have this character that can have no facial expressions, but how David Prowse kind of uses the body language of the character, and how James Earl Jones delivers the lines for Vader, and how all the little filmmaking aspects are able to drive you into the psyche and to see the deeper conflict with him, the psyche, the emotions, the sort of almost sorrowful, tragic quality of the character. You definitely get that feeling very strongly in Return of the Jedi that there is that deep down pain within the character of Vader and the fantastic conflict here. Everything that Luke Skywalker is saying throughout the whole film, that he felt some kind of conflict within the character. This film, you can feel it. It exudes off the character of Vader here and just creates the entire arc for the character in this film, that you see that this is the payoff. This is what the film is building towards. That redemption at the end of the film is absolutely fantastically executed. And what Ian McDiarmid does here as the Emperor is absolutely incredible to me, because in the previous film, at least the original theatrical and the 97 special editions, the Emperor was portrayed by Clive Revell as a much more aristocratic type of Emperor, but Ian McDiarmid comes in and makes the character his own chilling type of creation, because everyone thought that Darth Vader was kind of the epitome of evil in the entire galaxy, until this character shows up and he is absolutely terrifyingly chilling. What he does in this film creates an absolutely immense aura of evil and vile intentions. Ian McDiarmid's performance here is just on a completely different level of everything altogether, that everything he does to create this creepy persona of this character, every little thing from the makeup they put on this character, the posture, and everything else that he did with this character, everything he did was just so expertly and masterfully chosen and crafted to create an absolutely fantastic character here that just shows a corruption of evil like we have not perceived in this franchise up to this point. And beyond just the performance that McDiarmid puts forth here, that you definitely see that the Emperor is a much more cunning and intelligent and certainly deadly type of adversary here, that he plots the whole thing for the rebels to get all the plans, to get everything in motion, to push all the rebel alliance into one place, to theoretically squash them at one point in time. But certainly his overconfidence ends up being the better of him, as Luke Skywalker sort of predicts in the film. But it's just the fact that what McDiarmid did here, along with how the film presented the character and how the writing of the character was, created something that was just absolutely just scary as living hell. That just seeing those eyes that the character has, the entire makeup design of this character, everything that they did for the character of the Emperor here was just so absolutely, like I said, deadly and just absolutely intimidating as living hell. This is definitely the epitome of evil in this galaxy far, far away. This is the threat that Luke Skywalker has to go up against, that Obi-Wan and Yoda warn him about, that this is a cunning and dangerous Emperor, that he has a power that you cannot imagine. And everything with his character was just so expertly crafted in this film. It's no wonder that this is an actor that they decide to bring back and focus very heavily on the prequels, even though if his performance in the prequels definitely got a lot hammy and a little bit cheeky at certain times, there are still certain moments in those prequels where McDiarmid shows that he is a high quality actor and works some very, very good scenes in those films, and really shows a very strong kinship with his character to develop him to where he had to. But in this film, I think it's just the most chilling portrayal of this character overall. And I do think that all the actors are directed very strongly by Richard Marquand. I think that he does handle all the drama in the film very, very well. And the cinematography by Alan Hume, who had worked with Marquand previously on Eye of the Needle and shot a lot of James Bond films, For Your Eyes Only, Octopussy, A View to a Kill, along with Supergirl and a few other notable films, is a fairly good-looking film in a lot of cases. But I still think that Empire Strikes Back does have the most strength as a visual film. Return of the Jedi does have a lot of good moments in it that really allows Alan Hume to really shine, especially with the lighting in certain circumstances, especially, again, with that scene between Luke and Leia at Endor. The beautiful lighting that is just painted with a little bit of smoke here and there is absolutely a gorgeous artistic masterpiece of filmmaking there. And certainly Jabba's palace has a very good sort of smoky, seedy, sort of noir type of feel to it. There's a lot of good shadowy, high contrast visuals there that really just adds a certain atmosphere to his palace in such a fantastic type of way, just giving a really kind of down and dirty type of feeling to the whole thing. You feel like you're in the scum of the absolute galaxy here, but there's a few sequences, few little things here that I felt like familiar environments like the Bridge of the Star Destroyer or on Dagobah had a bit more subdued lighting that really kind of added again to that kind of somber type of tone the film has. Things are not so strongly lit, they're not as bright. Some places just kind of dim it down a little bit. Some places that I think the cinematography has an interesting quality to it, but there's not quite as much like movement with the camera to really give a lot of very big cinematic theatrical movement to the film like Empire had. But that's not to say that Return of the Jedi is not a fairly good looking film, but I just think that in certain cases that there could have been a bigger visual punch up with the artistry on the cinematography end of things, that things just could have looked a little bit more epic, could have pulled the scope out a little bit more. But in certain circumstances, like when you're out on Endor, you got all this dense forestry to work with, and you can't like get a big crane in there to get a big scoping shot or whatnot. So it's like certain environments that they're working in a lot more natural environments, a lot of on-location shooting that you really had so much in the previous two films, especially with a landscape like this. Really doesn't allow you to open up the frame a whole lot and do a lot of big dramatic camera movements, but it is a still good looking film that Alan Hume does a fantastic job of making this looking like a good solid film that still, again, could have used a little bit more of a visual punch up here and there, a little bit more artistic flair to just give it a little bit more here and there, but there's still good stuff to really credit him with how he photographed this film. And again, Industrial Light and Magic really stretched themselves as far as they possibly could with this film, because they took upon every single effect, whether it's practical, visual, or creature effects, upon themselves with this whole film to really just achieve something that just was completely daunting to them, to just create so much stuff for this film, so many character designs, so many different effect shots, so many different animatronics too, that again, when you get into Jabba's palace, there is such a fantastic sort of seedy, eclectic type of feel to it when you have just this explosion of just all these alien creatures here that ILM put together in their creature shop with guys like Phil Tippett and so many more artists conceptualizing and designing and putting together all this stuff. They worked very hard on it, and definitely getting someone revealed to us like Jabba the Hutt, who, before we had the special editions, we never saw Jabba the Hutt prior to this introduction in this film. They kept being mentioned by Han Solo over and over again, that he had a debt to pay to him, and now you finally see this fantastic character displayed on screen, and you just see that this is the sleaziest, scummiest gangster in the entire galaxy, and he absolutely fits the visual bill for it, because they just made this guy look just like the biggest slug in the galaxy. This guy, Jabba the Hutt, just looks absolutely fantastic in this film, using so many operators to bring him to so much organic life in this film that, speaking of special editions, I don't think they've ever had CGI do Jabba justice from what we saw here in a practical type of level. That this is a character that just took so much to actually achieve, and they just hit it completely out of the park with the design of him, the operation of him, everything they did made Jabba come to life on screen, along with a wide array of different characters here that even got someone like Admiral Akbar and all the other Mon Calamari in the film, just showing that the Rebel Alliance is made up of a lot of different eclectic cultures here. There's not just humans versus humans in this whole thing. There are other cultures and other species being oppressed by the Empire, and they're part of this fight. It just adds another layer to the entire Star Wars saga that really does kind of expand on it a little bit more, that does make the film feel like it has a lot more alien species in it that fill a wider universe in that type of fashion, that it makes the film feel like that in so many great ways. And even the Rancor beast is a really good achievement that, yeah, back in 1983 there were a lot of thick matte lines and some of the composites weren't, it wouldn't stand the test of time prior to all the remastering that have been done with the films, but the fact of the matter is it was still a very good achievement that they used. Really, originally was going to be Phil Tippett, one of the puppeteers at ILM, to really kind of just be a man in a suit in front of the camera and everything. But they didn't feel like that effect was really going to work terribly well, so they went with a much more scaled down hand puppet, shot at a much higher frame rate to cause a much more lumbering type of feel with the character to create such a fantastic effect with this thing, and compositing it with the live action stuff with Luke Skywalker and the Gamorrean Guard and everything really was a very good achievement, even though, like I said, prior to all the remastering that's been done on the film, you can kind of see that wouldn't quite hold up terribly well, but thankfully with the remasterings, we definitely have all those matte lines cleaned up and the composite is a little bit more solid. So it's like, over time, some of the effects in the film haven't stood up terribly well. I think there is a blue screen shot when our heroes are up on the skiff and everything, going through the Tatooine desert, being held prisoner by Jabba. And I don't think that blue screen composite worked very, very well. I mean, there were other blue screen composites in A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back that worked absolutely flawlessly. This one didn't work quite so well. I don't know if it's because it's so much of a brighter background or what happened, but it just doesn't quite hold up terribly well for me. But the fact of the matter is, there is such a plethora of incredible effects in this film, between the practical with all the creatures that are designed, and also the visual effects on most of the stuff in this film just really hit it right on the nail, because that speeder bike chase is an excellent sequence that still holds up very well today. I mean, there's still a little bit of jitteriness with how the stuff shot on the blue screen matches with the live action footage shot in the Force, but for a 1983 achievement, this is incredible type of work that they went out in the Force and shot 1 frame per second to create that illusion of intense speed through the Andorra Forest, to have this sequence just work so very well on such an intense type of level that's edited together so exquisitely well, and just like, I think the visual effect of it is still very good. You know, if it does have, like I said, a little bit of that wobbliness, how things kind of mesh in terms of the subtle movements and everything, but it's still a very good sequence that did end up attributing to why this Industrial Light and Magic team won yet another Oscar for their work. But the fact of the matter is, you'd only need one sequence in this film to guarantee them winning that award, and that is the climactic space battle in this film, because it is still one of the most impressive ones I've ever seen, with the depth of complexity that's involved with it, both on the visual level, the artistic level, and the absolute technical achievement it took to get that much stuff into the frame with optical composites. It was an absolutely masterful marvel, in my view, and still one of my favorite space battles of all time. You can just take all those clips of that sequence, edit together, and it's just an incredible type of experience to see all that emotion, all that speed going through this whole sequence, the depth of all these different ships battling out, and you can still get a sense of geography, sense of story with every single shot in this whole thing. Looks so exquisitely well, in my opinion. This is one of the best optical technical achievements that's ever been done in film, in my opinion, that the depth and complexity of what they had to do to achieve every single moment of the sequence was an absolutely sure, grueling type of task to get that much into the frame and have it all still tell a marvelous, clear, concise story. It is one of the best sequences you will ever see in a film of this kind. And I really do like the look of this partially completed Death Star that really just has a different type of feel to it overall than the original Death Star did. That if you're going to bring a plot element like that back in the film, certainly make it look distinctly different in a certain type of way, and never really had a problem with them just bringing back the Death Star, just probably because I grew up with these films without ever questioning many things. But yeah, you could probably see it as sort of a weak sort of retread element or whatnot, but it's just the fact that George Lucas had envisioned all this stuff as like one big massive film in a certain way to build up, to have all these things parallel with the destruction of the Death Star and all that type of stuff, the end of his entire story. It just felt like to kind of rehash it in a certain way, or just bring that element back into the climax of the whole thing, to really just have it play out the way he originally designed it. But whatever the fact, it's just like, it's not a thing I really care to have a problem with. So whatever the case, certain people would have a problem with it, that if you brought back the same plot device 2 films later, and just like it's the exact same type of thing you're going for, that the fleet's got to go in there, they got to destroy it again. So it's like, it's the same thing over and over again. but if you still execute it in a very good type of way and just kind of up the stakes in a certain way, that this film definitely does push it further, has all the plot elements surrounding it and converge upon it with how the Emperor sets everything up and plots against everyone else to set them up to have them be right there, not even realizing it is a functional Death Star yet, and have it start blowing the ships out of the sky. It creates a much more different dynamic overall that still works very well in my opinion. And certainly one of the stinging points for a number of different people in this film has been the Ewoks, which nothing that really bothers me, but just the fact that the Ewoks themselves are very much the least interesting quality of the entire film, that really just don't add much of anything to the narrative, and maybe for a certain viewpoint might actually hinder parts of the storyline, especially the climactic battle on Endor. Really just doesn't seem like after you saw in Empire Strikes Back how the absolutely decimates the Rebel Alliance in that film, showing how much firepower, how much destructive force that they have at their disposal. And then you just see the Imperial forces getting knocked around by little teddy bears and kind of wiped out by a couple scattered few of Rebel Alliance soldiers. It just doesn't feel like it has as much impact as you want it to. I don't mind having these characters present in the film, but if you're going to have that type of character in here, make it more interesting. Have it be characters, or have at least one character in there that actually has a depth and substance to them. Do something like you did with Yoda. Have a character that's kind of odd, kind of a little silly and whatnot at first, but has a certain depth to them. But there's really nothing with the Ewoks. They're just a random array of little furry creatures that kind of help you out in the battle, and there's just no investment in them as characters. They're just there to serve a function in the plot that really just doesn't kind of aid the film in a positive type of light. But still, the quality of the action in Return of the Jedi is still unparalleled in so many cases, because it is still so tightly put together, and certainly has a bit of a swashbuckling flair early on with Luke Skywalker lighting up the lightsaber up on the skiffs and everything, jumping from vehicle to vehicle, swinging around and everything. Just has that great sort of Errol Flynn type of feel. Just a fantastic type of thing, just unveiling Luke Skywalker as this fantastically talented and skilled Jedi, just absolutely owning the entire sequence, and just showing that he is that Jedi Knight that we've been wanting to see all this time. And just a fantastic sequence too, just has so much fun, thrilling type of qualities that just injects it with that classic Star Wars excitement and entertainment value overall. Just has all the classic elements that just make it such a superb sequence. Just like, again, the speeder bike chase, just that intense speed and everything, creating so much tension and peril too, but it gets even upped later on in the climax when you got three different sequences going on. You've got the fantastic space battle, like I said, with such a great intensity to it that even though you had the speeder bike chase, it just ups it even further. Just everything just moves along so fast, so quickly, so smoothly. Everything just hits it on the right levels, and again, you get more plot elements being introduced in the whole thing. The peril of the sequence keeps getting escalated and escalated until finally you get that triumphant moment with the Endor battle, with the entire shield generator being blown up, and the fantastic chase into the Death Star and everything. Still creates that great tight tension that you had with the trench run the first one, but there's just so much more of a certain peril because it's such tight quarters and everything. Just a fantastically marvelous, perfect sequence. And like I said, the Endor battle is pretty good, but it doesn't quite have as much peril as the space battle, or, like I said, with the Hoth battle in the previous film, just doesn't quite have as much stakes or quite as much danger or as much peril that there really should be in the whole thing. But the fact of the matter is, all the action in Return of the Jedi is very well put together. Still injects it, again, with that classic Star Wars feel, that this is exactly what you really want to go to a Star Wars film and really feel with the action of the film, along with all the fantastic other elements too. The action of the film is spectacularly put together and just really, really exceptional in many cases, just showcasing so many different aspects of the Star Wars universe. Just having that climax being split into three different parts, with the most important part being on the Death Star itself, between Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and the Emperor himself, and that amazing conflict, that battle of wits and manipulation from the Emperor. All these fantastic things going on with the emotions of the whole thing, the conflict, internal and external, everything that's going on. Just having the whole thing of Luke Skywalker standing there, just being able to watch all his friends being led into this trap, just tears at him, just rips at him inside, just like he feels powerless. He's so anxious to want to do something. The only thing he can do is just pull that lightsaber towards him and engage in some kind of combat, but it begins to touch on him, begins to tempt him towards the dark side, having him tap into a little bit of that anger, the aggression inside of him. Just how the Emperor just masterfully manipulates that whole sequence, just tips Luke Skywalker a little bit further and further, but it's just how everything just comes together with that whole thing. That is not about the choreography, it's not about the fight itself with the lightsabers, it's about the story and the characters and the emotions involved with the whole thing. It's about dramatic storytelling between the wits of all these characters, their psyches, their emotions, everything that's going on is so beautifully put together in that sequence that I think is very good. It's just the sequence, that's the payoff that you've wanted since you saw Empire Strikes Back. All these things culminate in this fantastic sequence with all these characters coming together against one another, and just have all this stuff develop. And just like that moment when Darth Vader is trying to tip into Luke Skywalker's psyche and everything, drawing those little secrets from deep down inside of him through the Force, and finding out about Leia being his sister, and then just sparks off Luke Skywalker into that final rage that he has there. And just that fantastic moment when you have that chorus into the music and everything, just creating such a grand epic type of feel when they're doing that clash of the lightsabers there, up until the moment where Luke chops Vader's hand off into a great moment of symbolism there. Luke sees the symbolism in that moment, sees that he's going to become just like his father, fell right into the dark side just as he did, the mirroring of their storylines and everything. And it's just fantastic in that moment how Luke just throws the lightsaber away. It's a fantastic moment from the character of Luke Skywalker, and just how, again, Mark Hamill plays the scene with so much confidence, that nobility, that honor that he has, that strength of will within him, that he can see that he's just pushing too much towards that end, and he's going to eject it from himself, that he throws the lightsaber away. It's like he's not even going to have the instrument be able to push himself towards that edge any further. It's that fantastic moment, but just like how the Emperor unleashes that Force lightning, and all these things build up to absolute perfect moment. That redemption of Darth Vader in this film is a fantastically crafted moment in the film, that obviously the Blu-ray version of this film, I feel, does ruin it with that added piece of dialogue for Darth Vader, that it was always that silent contemplation, that working out that conflict, that just completely wrenching himself inside about looking at his son being torn apart by the Emperor, and looking at the man who drew him into the dark side, made him give up and lose everything that he's had. He's not going to allow that man, the Emperor, to take away the one person that has believed in him so much at this point, the one person that still means something to him. He's not going to allow him to destroy that too. It's just an amazing moment having Darth Vader grab the Emperor and throw him down that shaft. It's just an amazing moment that I've always absolutely loved. It is one of the most climactic, iconic scenes that has ever been in a Star Wars film. That just is an absolute emotional apex that just completely alters everything for the character of Vader, and finally completely humanizes him when you see later on, when he asks Luke to unmask him, to see him with his own eyes, and you see the man underneath this frightening garb of Darth Vader. You see Anakin Skywalker, this scarred up gentleman, underneath all this stuff, and just see the sorrow and sadness and the sort of joy in his eyes, seeing the son that he has believe in him so much and save him and redeem him from the dark side of the Force. Is actually an amazing moment in this film that just, if you're going to have it, end with this type of thing, that even if the film does have that slow start, takes a little while to get some traction going, really kind of get you into the film strongly enough. If you end strong in the film, that is more important than beginning strong. If you could end strong on such an amazing moment, that is what you need. And this is the climax of this trilogy. that just adds everything to the entire arc that we've had going on through this whole saga here. It's a fantastic moment, and all this type of stuff. I absolutely love the funeral pyre moment in the film. That scene where you get the fantastic music of John Williams chiming in there with that nice Force theme and everything. It just swells up and just feel that moment so much. Just feel that sense of pathos, that sort of sorrow, but also a sense of joy and happiness that you feel, that relief that he's finally joined with the Force and everything. It's just an amazing moment in the film that just has all the right elements. It just has the great heart that Star Wars really needs to have it feel so much like Star Wars. And of course, the fantastic John Williams music in this film is still, again, great. There isn't as much new stuff that he adds to the film, but the Emperor's theme that he uses with, again, the chorus that he adds in there, just low rumbling type of feel. Whoa, man, that just adds so much presence to this absolutely chilling character. But the action cues in the film are just absolutely thrilling and just absolutely spectacular too. That there's so many things that he does with the music in the film that just still stirs up everything that you love about Star Wars, gives you the emotional punch that the film really needs. When you have Yoda pass away and you just have a very good sense of sorrow, a little kind of downbeat moment there, just everything that John Williams does, again, accentuates the emotion of the film, hits it right on the nail, and just everything that's done. Even the big thrilling triumphant moments of the film when, like, the Death Star's shield crashes and you just get that great fanfare come in and everyone just rushes towards the Death Star and the ships. And even when you get the whole thing where they blow up the Death Star and the Millennium Falcon with Lando at the con just shoots right out of the fire, just like it's great climactic, triumphant, victorious moments like this that just allows that film to just soar in so many different aspects that, despite any negatives I have attributed to this film, when it hits it right, is absolutely excellent in every type of way. That anything that might have used to actually improve any parts of the story, wherever it is that it hits on the absolute perfect levels, it does it on such a marvelous type of fashion that where it really needs to do, it does it spectacularly. That it gets all the elements that you really need to have pay off in this film and really get to the characters to that absolutely celebratory mode at the end of the film, where all the characters converting and just having a good time and just celebrating the victories that they've had, and have the Force ghosts of Obi-Wan, Yoda, and Anakin show up there and just have Luke with that fantastic look on his face as he just has that almost close to a tear in his eye type of look. They're just so happy to see this sort of peacefulness kind of wash over all the people that he knows. It's a fantastic moment in the film that this film ends on the right points, on the right levels, that everything it does so well. And just like, even though I could, like I have, levied certain things that certain points of the film could have been better, could have accentuated certain elements that are introduced in the film, I still think Return of the Jedi is a very good film, despite any negatives that it has. That, again, what it hits off on great. And just like, if I can get this passionate when you're talking about how those things end up and how those moments pay off in the film, it means it's a good film. I think Return of the Jedi might not be, on a whole, as good as like the previous two films, but I still think it is a respectable film in the trilogy to have things kind of end off here in this trilogy. But obviously we know we have a whole sequel trilogy and a bunch of other films coming up in this franchise, but just the fact of the matter is, concluding this story arc, concluding this whole trilogy on this note, is a very good note too. And what do you guys feel about Return of the Jedi overall? Because some people feel this is their favorite of the entire trilogy. So if you do have that differing opinion, if you do hold this on that highest level, definitely post your comments and feelings about it below. And just in general, what are you hoping for with The Force Awakens? Because it's coming very soon. By the time I get this release, I'll probably be just getting it out just in time. So definitely post your comments below about Return of the Jedi and your hopes for The Force Awakens below. And I will definitely be having a review of the new Star Wars film, Episode 7, The Force Awakens, this weekend. So thanks for watching, guys. Return of the Jedi, despite any kind of flaws that I feel it has, still is a good, respectable film for the Star Wars trilogy here. So thanks, guys, for watching. I'll be back soon with some fantastic new stuff. And take care, and may the Force be with you.